All right, folks, we just endured the debate between Tim Walz and J.D. Vance. My overall take on that debate, extremely boring. You know, that watching a debate like that makes me appreciate that we are a collapsing empire, because in a collapsing empire, the debates are at least kind of interesting because they are a circus, right? I mean, when an empire like ours collapses as violently and as unwillingly as it does, you get, demented Joe Biden. You're a loser. You're a sucker. Oh, he's an idiot. You get, at least it's entertaining. This is like, you know what? This is one more reason why I hope the country continues to collapse. We'll get entertaining debates through that. This was like a flashback to like when people tried to get along. How boring is that? Who really wants that? Overall take, I would say actually, if I had to award a winner of that debate, I would actually say it was J.D. Vance. And the reason I would say it was J.D. Vance is because this had the potential, since Vance has been so uncharismatic and such an oaf, this had the potential to look like the Paul Ryan versus Joe Biden debate in 2012, where the old avuncular guy goes and smacks around the new kid who's in over his head. Like, it could have been one of those. And it wasn't. Vance held his own pretty good. Walz was very soft on him. And so in that respect, I would have to say on points, I would actually say J.D. Vance probably won that debate. Here's the major caveat, though. The major caveat, though, is that this abortion issue is a killer for Republicans. And once again, the Republican gets their ass handed to them on that issue. Like, Tim Walz just cleaned his clock on that issue because there's nothing you could say as a Republican on that issue.
Bill says, but look, this issue is what's on everyone's mind. Donald Trump put this all into motion. He brags about how great it was that he put the judges in and overturned Roe versus Wade, 52 years of personal autonomy. And then he tells us, oh, we send it to the states. It's a beautiful thing. Amanda Zaworski would disagree with you on it's a beautiful thing. A young bride in Texas waiting for their child at 18 weeks. She has a complication, a tear in the membrane. She needs to go in. The medical care at that point needs to be decided by the doctor. And that would have been an abortion. But in Texas, that would have put them in legal jeopardy. She went home, got sepsis, nearly dies, and now she may have difficulty having children. Or in Kentucky, Hadley Duvall, a 12-year-old child raped and impregnated by her stepfather. Those are horrific. Now, when God asked about that, Senator Vance said, two wrongs don't make a right. There is no right.
J.D. Vance coming, well, we have to reestablish trust with the American people. Well, how'd you lose trust?
Senator, do you want to respond to the governor's claim? Will you create a federal pregnancy monitoring agency?
No, Nora, certainly we won't. And I want to talk about this issue because I know a lot of Americans care about it, and I know a lot of Americans don't agree with everything that I've ever said on this topic. And, I grew up in a working class family in a neighborhood where I knew a lot of young women who had unplanned pregnancies and decided to terminate those pregnancies because they feel like they didn't have any other options. And, one of them is actually very dear to me. And I know she's watching tonight, and I love you. And she told me something a couple years ago that she felt like if she hadn't had that abortion, that it would have destroyed her life because she was in an abusive relationship. And I think that what I take from that as a Republican who proudly wants to protect innocent life in this country, who proudly wants to protect the vulnerable, is that my party, we've got to do so much better of a job at earning the American people's trust back on this issue where they frankly just don't trust us. And I think that's one of the things that Donald Trump and I are endeavoring to do. I want us as a Republican Party to be pro-family in the fullest sense of the word. I want us to support fertility treatments. I want us to make it easier for moms to afford to have babies. I want it to make it easier for young families to afford a home so they can afford a place to raise that family. And I think there's so much that we can do on the public policy front just to give women more options. Now, of course, Donald Trump has been very clear that on the abortion policy specifically, that we have a big country and it's diverse. And California has a different viewpoint on this than Georgia. Georgia has a different viewpoint from Arizona. And the proper way to handle this, as messy as democracy sometimes is to let voters make these decisions, let the individual states make their abortion policy. And I think that's what makes the most sense in a very big, a very diverse, and let's be honest, sometimes a very, very messy and divided country.
You lost trust by catering to the Christian right for 40 years. when you can be as radical as you wanted in your rhetoric, because it made no difference, because Roe v. Wade was protecting any of that rhetoric from actually influencing any sort of abortion decisions by governments, because they were restrained by that court ruling. Now that that restriction is no more, we're seeing the consequences, which Tim Walz laid out very kind of viscerally with a few personal stories of women who got sick. One woman died because she couldn't get the care she needed, and he had no answer to that. So I think overall, on points, Vance probably won it. I think if you were the Democrats, you really wanted a Joe Biden versus Paul Ryan. You wanted the Uncle Tim, Coach Tim, to go out there and smack him around and make him look like a moron, and he didn't. But the one caveat is the issue that we know has legs from the last election, from the midterms, that issue is still a disaster. And the Democrats are going to get a few clips out of that portion of the debate to play, to cut into ads, to put out there on social media. And so that's the caveat. But other than that, I thought missed opportunity for the Democrats. I thought Vance probably won it on points. But overall, it's a very boring debate, mostly inconsequential.
All right. So, having spent like the past 3 days in museums that have these displays that boil down moments in American history, I couldn't help but envision the way they would present this debate at the Smithsonian with horrified and bored Americans watching this end of history debate. And this was the last debate
Right.
in which
Yeah.
in which Americans had a right to vote. Um, yeah, look, it is interesting that the two vice presidential candidates, at least in the way they present, are less freakish than the top of the ticket and much more capable of forming complete thoughts and sentences. Waltz made much more sense in expressing himself than Kamala ever has on her best day. And
Or
likewise,
Biden, obviously.
or Biden, and likewise Vance. You know, I mean, there were moments there where, if it was Trump, it would have been, yeah, well, I heard your wife, she came out of the bathroom with toilet paper stuck to her shoe the other day. Everyone was talking about it.
Yeah, right, yeah.
It was so embarrassing. Everyone was embarrassed. They didn't know what to do. They didn't know if they should try to take it off or tell her about it. To just see a politician behave in a normal way. We almost forgot what that looks like. As you say, that bored you a bit, that it was kind of a normal debate.
Right.
At the same time, these people aren't going to do shit for you. They're not going to do shit for you. It's a choice between a little triage care from the Waltz camp, and then Vance. Hey, I don't usually credit him with having very good political skills, but he did handle himself just fine here. And as you say, he had the most to prove. So yeah, he probably gained the most from
That's
this.
what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah, he gained the most. But the Republican policies for working people are pretty much non-existent. And it's hard for them to hide that when things like healthcare
Right.
come up.
Right.
Because they don't actually have any plans.
Right.
Now, Vance, is kind of doing a more educated, articulate version of Trump's. It'll be a big, beautiful plan. You've never seen anything like it, without actually telling you anything about what they would actually do. Vance's take on that Trumpism is, we have to do better and we have to help working people. But he's not actually telling you anything that they would do. They're not going to do anything on healthcare. What was that gobbledygook about housing? What was that gobbledygook? And I said it in the middle of it. So let me explain this more. There are a lot of factors. We were talking about venture capital coming in and buying up houses. That is, and particularly in certain markets, that's having a bigger impact in certain cities than others. But it's also, in terms of a more long-term systemic thing, The boomers built their suburban enclaves, and then they used their economic and demographic power to NIMBY the whole country so that you couldn't build any more housing in their areas. This is a big part of why we have a housing shortage that neither campaign will ever address, because those people fucking vote their asses off.
This issue of housing, and I think those of you listening on this, the problem we've had is that we've got a lot of folks that see housing as another commodity. It can be bought up, it can be shifted, it can be moved around. Those are not folks living in those houses. Those of you listening tonight, that house is a big deal. I bought and owned one house in my life. My mom still lives in the house where I was. And when I think of a house, I'm thinking of Christmas services after midnight mass where you go with your family. We need to make it more affordable. And one of the things, as I said, this program that the vice president is pushing forward and bringing a new way of approaching this is something we're doing in Minnesota from that lead. We in the state invested in making sure our housing was the biggest investment that we'd ever made in housing. It starts to make it easier. We cut some of the red tape. Local folks, look, we can't do it at the federal level, but local folks make it easier to build those homes. And then that down payment assistance. I can tell all of you out there, certainly for me, using the GI Bill was one thing, but a veteran's home loan, the big thing about a veteran's home loan is you don't have to pay the down payment.
They're holding on to these houses. They're not selling them. They're not going to the retirement homes. They're staying in their houses. They've got these historically low mortgages locked in, which is part of it, because the downsize thing doesn't work for them now, because then they're going to have a mortgage at the current rate in whatever, condo they downsize to. So they're just keeping these houses, on top of the fact that they gamed the system to create regulations and zoning laws that don't allow new housing to be built in their neighborhoods. So that is an element you'll never hear these people address, because for the same reason those laws exist. These people have too much political power to go after them.
Well, the other thing too, I mean, so like on that issue, on the housing issue, also on the healthcare issue, and even on the paid leave issue, Vance is of this new sort of populist wing of the Republican Party that is at least trying to, as a thematic pitch at least,
right.
distance itself from, Reaganism and things like that. So, he tries to make an argument that is different from your standard bootstrap, sink or swim kind of thing. Well, we want to give you options in terms of paid leave. And no, of course, we don't want the people with pre-existing conditions to be charged more. But substance-wise, they are still very much the Reaganomics party. Yeah. And so he can't really do...
baby.
Yeah, exactly. He can't really do anything but gesture away from that without putting any meat on the bones. And this is why I say Vance... at the end of the day, won on points, because Waltz didn't push him on any real specifics there. Like, he didn't really nail him down. Waltz seemed to want to have fun with him. Waltz seemed to want to get along with him. It was very chummy, too chummy. Both of these candidates,
he's like a nervous little sausage up there.
Well, both of these candidates seem to think this is like an existential battle for the future of the country. And yet both of the candidates actually seem to go out of their way to be nice to the other one. Right? Now, maybe they think that's going to warm the hearts of some normies there, but I don't get it. I think both of the candidates missed opportunities to really twist the knife in the other one's back. Like, I don't know what the fuck that Waltz thing was where he was talking about his trip to Hong Kong.
Governor Walz, you said you were in Hong Kong during the deadly Tiananmen Square protests in the spring of 1989. But Minnesota Public Radio and other media outlets are reporting that you actually didn't travel to Asia until August of that year. Can you explain that discrepancy?
Yeah, well, and to the folks out there who didn't get at the top of this, look, I grew up in small rural Nebraska, town of 400, town that you rode your bike with your buddies till the streetlights come on, and I'm proud of that service. I joined the National Guard at 17, worked on family farms, and then I used the GI Bill to become a teacher, passionate about it, a young teacher. My first year out, I got the opportunity in the summer of '89 to travel to China. 35 years ago, be able to do that. I came back home and then started a program to take young people there. We would take basketball teams, we would take baseball teams, we would take dancers, and we would go back and forth to China. The issue for that was to try and learn. Now, look, my community knows who I am. They saw where I was at. Look, I will be the first to tell you, I have poured my heart into my community. I've tried to do the best I can, but I've not been perfect. And I'm a knucklehead at times, but it's always been about that. Those same people elected me to Congress.
He froze up. He talked too much. The moderator asked him to clarify that answer, and he just should have given a 2-word thing to move on. Instead, he tried to start again, and he lost his place.
Governor, just to follow up on that, the question was, can you explain the discrepancy?
All I said on this was I got there that summer and misspoke on this. So I will just, that's what I've said. So I was in Hong Kong and China during the democracy protests, went in. And from that, I learned a lot of what needed to be in governance.
Vance didn't pursue that. Waltz didn't pursue the healthcare stuff. I don't think he nailed him down hard enough even on the abortion issue or on the specifics of the cats and dogs thing. I mean, Vance started the whole cats and dogs thing. Waltz made a sort of very, very passing reference that, well, you said you started a story, meaning Vance says, well, I started the story about the cats and dogs. But he didn't nail him down on that. So, I think both candidates performed well enough to charm, certain, white picket fence families.
Right.
But both pulled a lot of punches too. Ultimately, the reason I think Vance is the technical winner of this, not that it means all that much, is that he had the most to lose. He could have come off as the green kid, the new kid who's in over his head, who got smacked around by the veteran politician, and he didn't. And that's what you were looking for if you were the Democrats and you didn't get it. So it ends up being kind of a wash. I don't think this will move the polls much, if at all.
No, all I can say is, in keeping with what we've been saying and what I said at Rage Against the War Machine, if you had any doubt that the Republicans have no plan for working people, this should dispel it.
Yeah,
This should dispel it, because Vance is far more articulate and intelligent than Donald Trump is. If there were actually a plan, he would have been able to express it. He would have been able to outline it. He very intentionally never did that.
Right.
All he did was signal, you're missing your leg. Your leg got cut off at the factory, and you're going to get evicted. That really sucks. It's bad. That's bad.
He seemed fairly sheepish on a lot of points, even the deportation point. Trump is out there bragging that deportations are going to start on day one. Trump leads with that. I mean, he's very proud of that. And actually, polling shows that the American people are surprisingly sympathetic to that. Over 50% want that. So you would think Vance might want to lean into that just from a strategy standpoint. Obviously, I'm not saying I support the policy, but from a strategy standpoint, if you're the guy's running mate and the top of the ticket is touting that policy, and you do seem to have majority support on that policy, you'd think he would be very comfortable just embracing that. He didn't seem comfortable with much policy. I mean, Vance was just towing a line. And again, the reason I think he wins is because he wasn't really challenged enough. He had the most to lose. He could very have easily been knocked off of the balance beam, and he wasn't. He was able to just very sort of meekly toe a certain line, strike a certain balance, speak pretty vaguely in terms of just about every policy answer. And Waltz pretty much let him get away with it. Now, Vance let Tim Waltz get away with every lot too, but Waltz didn't have anything to prove. He's the old guy. He's the veteran. He's been in the game. Like, nobody's looking at Waltz saying how this guy's going to perform. He basically did what everyone expected to do. Vance, it could have gone either way, and it didn't go sideways. So that's why I think he comes out with the win, so to speak.
Well, because of who Donald Trump is, it's almost like you have an inversion of the normal president-vice president thing, because you have an attack dog at the top of the ticket.
Right, exactly.
He's doing the nice guy.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a good observation. Usually they call the VP the attack dog. In this case, Trump is the attack dog.
Right.
Yeah.
It's on him to actually make the ticket look softer.
Right. Exactly.
Because, you got Trump up there insulting, Yeah, my crowd sizes are the best.
Yeah,
They're
right,
the best.
exactly.
Like, that's stopping the ticket. You got to come off like the softer good cop.
Please clap.